Listen, I need to talk to you about something that's been eating at me for weeks now, and I know a lot of you watching this have been thinking the exact same thing. We're sitting here in December 2025. The Cleveland Browns are 3-11, and Shedeur Sanders is starting at quarterback after being a fifth-round pick. A fifth-round pick. Let that sink in for a second. This organization drafted a quarterback in the fifth round, threw him into the fire mid-season, and now we're supposed to believe this is the future. Something doesn't add up here, and the more I dig into this situation, the more I realize we might be watching one of the most calculated setup jobs in NFL history. Before you click away thinking this is just another hot take, I want you to stick with me because what I'm about to lay out for you is backed by facts, timelines, and patterns that this front office has shown over the past 5 years. The Cleveland Browns didn't draft Shedeur Sanders to succeed. They drafted him to fail, and I'm going to prove it to you over the course of this video with evidence that's been hiding in plain sight this entire season. Think about the context for a second. The Browns used their third-round pick on Dillon Gabriel, a quarterback who actually had legitimate first-round talent. Gabriel comes in, he's the guy, he's starting games, and yeah, the record wasn't great at 1-5, but if you actually watch those games, you know he was showing flashes, he was making throws, he was developing. Then what happens? Convenient concussion, he gets shut down, and instead of giving him time to recover and come back, instead of protecting their third-round investment, they pivot to Shedeur Sanders, a guy they took in the fifth round, and they make him the starter for the rest of the season. Now let me ask you something. When has an NFL franchise ever benched a higher draft pick who's healthy for a lower draft pick unless there's something else going on? It doesn't happen. Draft capital matters in this league. Teams protect their investments. The Browns spent more draft capital on Gabriel, which means by all traditional logic, he should have been given every opportunity to prove himself. But that's not what happened. Gabriel gets concussed, and suddenly it's Shedeur's team. Just like that. No competition. No easing him in. They just hand him the keys to a 3-8 team with zero playoff hopes and say, figure it out, kid. And here's where it gets really interesting. Look at the schedule they threw Shedeur into. His first start against Pittsburgh Steelers defense that was top 5 in the league. Then they got the Chiefs, one of the best teams in football. Then they had to face a Bears defense that absolutely demolished him 31-3. These weren't games against the Giants or the Panthers or teams that were tanking. These were legitimate playoff contenders with elite defenses designed to make young quarterbacks look lost. The Browns front office knew exactly what they were doing when they made this schedule work out this way. Let's talk about that Bears game for a second because that's when everything became crystal clear to me. Shedeur throws for 364 yards. 364 yards. That's not a bad game statistically. That's actually a solid performance for a rookie quarterback making his third or fourth start in the NFL. But they lost 31-3. How does a quarterback throw for that many yards and the team only scores 3 points? I'll tell you how. The coaching staff puts him in positions to fail. They call plays that pad his stats, but don't actually move the team down the field when it matters. They let him throw all game in garbage time when the defense is playing prevent and doesn't care about giving up yards between the 20s. You want to know what really happened in that game? The Browns fell behind early, the run game got abandoned completely, and they turned Shedeur into a statue in the pocket against one of the most aggressive pass rushes in football. No play action, no bootlegs, no designed rollouts to give him easy completions and get him in rhythm. Just drop back, go through your reads, and hope you don't get killed. That's not how you develop a rookie quarterback. That's how you expose one. That's how you make him look worse than he actually is so you can justify moving on from him in the offseason. And it worked, didn't it? After that game, what was everyone talking about? Shedeur can't win games. Shedeur is all stats and no substance. Shedeur doesn't have it. The narrative shifted immediately from this kid might be something to this kid is definitely not the answer. The Browns created that narrative on purpose. They needed that narrative to exist so they could justify using one of their 2 first-round picks in the 2026 draft on another quarterback. Let's talk about those draft picks because this is where the conspiracy gets even deeper. The Browns are sitting on a top 5 pick right now, probably going to end up at 3 or 4 based on how the rest of the season plays out. They also have the Jaguars pick from a trade they made, and depending on how Jacksonville finishes, that could be anywhere from 15 to 25. 2 first-round picks in a draft class that has some legitimate quarterback talent at the top. Fernando Mendoza is going to be there. There are rumors about other guys declaring early. The Browns are positioned to either draft a quarterback in the top 5 or trade up to get the guy they really want. Now ask yourself this question. If the Browns genuinely believed Shedeur Sanders was the future, if they really thought he was the answer at quarterback, why would they be in position to draft that high? Why wouldn't they have played Dillon Gabriel the entire season? Gabriel was the higher pick. He had more experience. He was the safer option to potentially win a few more games and push them out of the top 5. But they didn't do that. They went with Shedeur. And whether by design or by happy accident, they're now picking in the top 5 with the ammunition to go get another quarterback. You see where I'm going with this? The Browns never intended for Shedeur to be the guy. He was always a placeholder. He was always the sacrificial lamb they could trot out there in a lost season, let him take his lumps, accumulate some garbage time stats to make it look like he got a fair shot, and then move on to their real plan in the draft. Shedeur Sanders was drafted to fail so the Browns could justify starting over at quarterback again without the fan base completely revolting. And before you tell me I'm being too harsh on the organization, let me remind you of their track record. This is the same front office that fully guaranteed $230 million to Deshaun Watson, a quarterback who hadn't played in over a year and was facing multiple allegations. That contract is still on the books. It's still crippling this team financially. And now they're running through rookie quarterbacks like they're trying out different flavors at an ice cream shop. Baker Mayfield didn't work out. They moved on. Jacoby Brissett was a bridge. Watson was supposed to be the answer, but clearly isn't. Now they've got Gabriel and Sanders, and neither one of them is being developed properly. This is a pattern. The Browns don't develop quarterbacks. They churn through them. They draft them. They throw them into impossible situations. And when it doesn't work out immediately, they move on to the next guy. It's been happening for 2 decades, and it's happening again right now with Shedeur Sanders. The difference this time is they were smart enough to use late-round capital on him. So when they move on, nobody can accuse them of wasting a high pick. Let's get into the actual football for a minute because I want to show you specifically how they're setting him up to fail. Watch the play calling when Shedeur is in the game. 3rd and long situations, they're asking him to make NFL throws into tight windows against disguised coverages. They're not simplifying the game for him. They're not using motion to give him easy pre-snap reads. They're not designing plays where his first read is open 90% of the time to build his confidence. Kevin Stefanski is calling the game like Shedeur is a 10-year veteran who should be able to handle anything, not like he's a rookie 5th-round pick who needs to be brought along slowly. Compare that to how other teams handle their rookie quarterbacks. Look at how the Texans brought along C.J. Stroud last year. Look at how the Colts have managed Anthony Richardson when he's been healthy. Those teams understand you have to protect your young quarterback mentally and physically. You run the ball to take pressure off them. You use play action to create easy throws. You design the offense around their strengths, not their weaknesses. The Browns aren't doing any of that with Shedeur. And it's not just the play calling. Look at the roster construction around him. The offensive line has been a disaster all season. Shedeur is getting hit constantly. He's under pressure on over 40% of his dropbacks, according to the advanced metrics. That's insane. You can't develop a quarterback when he's running for his life every other play. And whose fault is that? The front office. Andrew Berry had multiple off seasons to fix that offensive line, and he didn't do it. They went into this season knowing the line was questionable, and they did nothing to address it. So now you've got a rookie quarterback who's already at a disadvantage because of his draft position, and you're putting him behind one of the worst pass protection units in football. How is that setting him up to succeed? The receiving core isn't much better. Jerry Jeudy just scored his first touchdown of the season in Week 14. His first touchdown, that's your number 1 receiver. Elijah Moore has been inconsistent all year. Amari Cooper got traded. David Njoku is solid, but he's a tight end. He can't carry the entire passing game by himself. So Shedeur is working with a receiving group that can't separate, can't make contested catches, and can't score touchdowns. But somehow he's supposed to come in as a 5th-round rookie and make it all work. That's not realistic. That's not fair. And the Browns know it's not fair. They're counting on it not being fair. Here's another thing that bothers me. The media coverage around Shedeur has been overwhelmingly negative, and I think the Browns are feeding into that narrative. Every time he has a bad game, suddenly there are anonymous sources talking about concerns in the building, sources close to the team suggesting maybe they need to look at quarterback in the draft. Where are those sources coming from? Who benefits from that narrative getting out there? The Browns front office benefits because it gives them cover to draft another quarterback without looking incompetent. Think about the optics for a second. If the Browns come out after this season and say, we're drafting a quarterback in the first round, the immediate question from fans and media is going to be, what about Sanders and Gabriel? You just drafted 2 quarterbacks. Why are you drafting another one? But if they spend the next month letting negative stories leak about Shedeur's performance, about concerns with his decision-making, about questions whether he can be a franchise guy, suddenly drafting another quarterback seems justified. They're manufacturing consent among the fan base to make their next move. And let's talk about Dillon Gabriel for a second, because he's the other victim in all of this. That concussion was in week 7. It's now December. He's been cleared for weeks. He's healthy. He's practicing. But Kevin Stefanski keeps saying, Shedeur gives us the best chance to win. Really? Shedeur gives you the best chance to win? You're 3-11. You've lost every game since he became the starter. At what point do you put Gabriel back in, if only to see what you have in him? Unless, of course, you don't want to know what you have in him. Unless you've already decided you're moving on from both of these guys and it doesn't matter who plays because this season is cooked anyway. The disrespect to Gabriel is astounding when you really think about it. He was a 3rd-round pick. He had a legitimate college resume at Oregon. He showed more in his limited starts than Shedeur has shown. But he got hurt at the wrong time, and now his career in Cleveland might be over before it really started. And why? Because the front office needed to see what they had in the shiny new toy from Colorado. Because Dillon Sanders' son generates headlines and attention. Because failing with Shedeur gives them better cover than failing with Gabriel. Here's what really gets me fired up about this whole situation. Myles Garrett is in his prime right now. He's arguably the best defensive player in football. The Browns have a top 10 defense, even with this terrible record. They've got pieces on that side of the ball. They should be competing, but instead they're wasting Garrett's prime years on another failed quarterback experiment. How many more of these experiments does he have to sit through before he demands a trade? How many more losing seasons before this entire thing falls apart? The Browns had a chance to build something sustainable this year. They could have stuck with Gabriel, built the offense around him, used the draft picks to improve the offensive line and add weapons. They could have competed for a wild card spot with that defense, but they didn't do that. They punted on the season in week 8 by making the switch to Shedeur, and now they're going to use this season's failure as justification to blow it all up again and start over with another quarterback. You know what the craziest part about all of this is? Shedeur Sanders might actually be good. He might have legitimate NFL talent. We might look back in 3 years and see him starting somewhere else and playing well. But we'll never know if he could have worked in Cleveland because they never gave him a real chance. They threw him into a situation designed to make him fail. And when he failed exactly as they expected, they'll use it as evidence that he's not the guy. That's the most frustrating part of this entire thing. The Browns have created a self-fulfilling prophecy. They drafted Shedeur in the 5th round, which immediately signals they don't value him as a legitimate franchise quarterback. They waited until the season was lost to make him the starter, which meant there was 0 playoff incentive. They put him behind a terrible offensive line with mediocre weapons and no running game. They called plays that exposed his weaknesses instead of highlighting his strengths. And then when it didn't work out, they're going to say, see, we tried. He's not it. Time to move on. It's organizational malpractice disguised as giving someone a shot. And the worst part is Browns fans are going to buy into it because they're desperate for hope. They're desperate to believe that the next guy is going to be different. The next quarterback is going to be the one. Just one more draft pick and everything will turn around. But it won't turn around because the problem isn't the quarterbacks. The problem is the organization. The problem is the front office that keeps making the same mistakes over and over again. Andrew Berry has been the general manager since 2020. In that time, he's now gone through Baker Mayfield, Case Keenum, Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, Dillon Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders at quarterback. 6 different quarterbacks in 5 years. And somehow the narrative is always that the quarterback wasn't good enough. Never that maybe the organization is failing these guys. Never that maybe the coaching staff isn't developing them properly. Never that maybe the roster construction is fundamentally flawed. The Browns are about to have 2 first-round picks in a loaded draft class. They're going to be able to get a blue-chip player or trade up for a quarterback. And I guarantee you, I absolutely guarantee you, they're going to draft another quarterback. They're going to take Fernando Mendoza or whoever the top guy is, and they're going to tell us that this time it's different. This time they've got their franchise guy, and we're going to watch the same thing happen all over again because this organization is incapable of learning from its mistakes. Shedeur Sanders is going to be a footnote in Browns history, a 5th-round pick who started a few games in a lost season and then disappeared. He'll probably end up on another team's practice squad, maybe get another chance somewhere down the line. But his time in Cleveland will be remembered as another failure in a long line of failures. And it didn't have to be that way. If the Browns had actually invested in him, if they had built a competent roster around him, if they had developed him properly, maybe it could have worked. But they didn't do any of those things because they were never trying to make it work in the first place. That's what makes this situation so frustrating and so infuriating. We're watching an organization deliberately sabotage a young player's career for their own benefit. They're using Shedeur Sanders as a tank commander without actually admitting that's what they're doing. They get to keep their draft position. They get to justify drafting another quarterback. And they get to act like they gave these guys a fair shot when everyone with eyes can see they did no such thing. The evidence is overwhelming when you actually look at it objectively. The draft position, the timing of when he became the starter, the roster around him, the play calling, the schedule, the media leaks, everything points to this being a calculated move by the front office. Shedeur Sanders was set up to fail from day one. And the tragedy is that Browns fans are going to suffer through another year of mediocrity because their team refuses to commit to actual development and instead keeps chasing the next shiny object. So, yeah, I think the Browns drafted Shedeur Sanders to fail. I think it was deliberate. I think it was calculated. And I think we're all being gaslit into believing this was a genuine attempt to find their quarterback of the future when it was really just another chapter in the most dysfunctional franchise in professional sports. The Browns don't want to succeed. They want excuses. They want draft picks. They want to keep the cycle going because as long as they can keep blaming the quarterback, they never have to look in the mirror and admit that they're the problem. And that's the real controversy here. It's not whether Shedeur Sanders is good enough. It's whether the Cleveland Browns organization is capable of developing any quarterback regardless of talent level. Based on the last 25 years of evidence, I think we all know the answer to that question. But they're going to keep trying the same thing and expecting different results. And players like Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel are going to be the casualties. That's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. The Browns are a quarterback graveyard, and Shedeur Sanders is just the latest body they're burying.